Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. Jerome Powell. Trump wants Jerome Powell to step down, insinuating that he does. Jerome Powell's out there trying to blame lots of years of mismanagement on his part on Trump's tariffs. They see that as an off-ramp for blaming what the Fed has buried everybody into with really horrendous mismanagement. This goes back to several Federal Reserve chairmen, Janet Yellen for one, Ben Bernanke for another, all these kinds of folks that have been running the Fed. Jerome Powell was appointed by Trump, and these guys play nice when they do their interview process, but when they get into the seat, it goes to their head. They start going to a few Jackson Hole meetings, and they start thinking they run the world. Federal Reserve, just for the basics of it, should have never been created. It was an idea. Idea does not favor the United States. If you're not managing your monetary policy with elected representatives, which is what we need to be doing, you can't have a bunch of centralized banks operating independently of your government running your monetary policy. That is stupid. The 1913 Jekyll Island effort. As far as conspiracy theory, I don't think that they thought that deeply about what was going to happen. Centralized bankers, they have their own ideas about things, and they think they're smart, and they are about certain things, but they don't see the larger aspects of monetary policy and how it philosophically rolls into mass society and what the obligations are. They just want to make sure their breadbasket's taken care of. So you can't have a centralized, and that's the whole thing with a president from an executive branch nominating people to run or head the Fed, like Trump did with Powell originally, and then to say, okay, now that's as much input that voters get on controlling the Federal Reserve, because it's centralized banks. We put a figurehead in there. All the bankers kind of deal with the same level of Marxism, and then they come up through the ranks, and they get so they're there's a chance for them to be nominated for such a job. And then you're a president, and you get to pick this Marxist, this socialist, this communist, all these people that studied all this Keynesian economics for all their lives. And they're all wrong theories, and you get to pick one, put in the Federal Reserve. So you hope that you pick one, they put them in their Federal Reserve. If you're Trump, you're like, well, I can have enough influence, I think, because I'm persuasive. I can control them and kind of keep them where they need to be. Problem is, you had 4 years of Biden. You had Jerome Powell, modern monetary theory, quantitative easing for many years. The Fed had been in bed with BlackRock, with Larry Fink, and his crazy liberal, his little letters he would send to all these CEOs of all these companies. You better act like a liberal organization, or we're going to destroy you. Essentially, there's the message. And who gave Larry Fink all that power? Who was it? It was the Fed. It was the Fed playing a silly game of printing a bunch of phony money and then washing it through Wall Street through losers, radical losers like Larry Fink, to then use the propped up assets of the house of cards that they built, wet cards at that, ready to fall apart on a moment's notice. And they use that to go out and buy assets and buy all these boards. And if you want to know what the number one problem is in the country, in the economy, right this minute, 2025, April, it is the lack of personal ownership and the amount that centralized banks control financial assets of every company you see out there. Almost every company you see driving down the road, if they're privately owned, there's someone out there plotting and scheming to take them over. You can bet on it. And who's attached to those schemers? All these big money managers that are attached to these big firms that have been propped up by all that phony money that the Fed saturated the market with, and then use that phony money to buy up assets. And then once they control the assets, they control how that company makes money how they hire, what they do, what kind of social policies they create, and they micromanage them from the inside out through their human resources department. And it's a bad problem. And so when they're out there talking about Trump getting rid of Jerome Powell because he won't buy into lowering interest rates to get the market moving in a proper direction, encouraging people to invest. Because we've allowed these centralized bankers to determine monetary theory. And that's exactly what Andrew Jackson fought against, and righteously so. The Federal Reserve should have never been created. It didn't have a right to be in a position where we don't have oversight other than an executive branch that can appoint the head of it. And when Jerome Powell was asked if he was going to step down or if Trump would tell him, he's like, no, by law, they can't interfere. How do you have a system that runs your monetary policy of your government not regulated by the people, by the voters? So we got to go rethink the Federal Reserve completely. It was a bad idea from the outset, ill-conceived, and they've committed many sins. And I would argue that even since 2000, before that even going back to Alan Greenspan, and he was supposed to be an Ayn Rand objectivist, and when you start having to put pen to paper, it's not so easy to do when reality's staring you in the face. And he didn't do a very good job, I don't think. And then all the subsequent Federal Reserve chairmen have their own problems, going all the way up through Bernanke and the alliance with Larry Fink after the 2008 housing collapse. Who didn't see that coming? And then they took all that debt and washed it, printed a bunch of money to go along with it, and they funneled it through Wall Street. And they gave it to Fink to go manage those funds. And BlackRock then used that to go make alliances with countries like China and give them leverage and power towards centralized banks to rule over the elected governments. Not appropriate at all. And now it's all coming to a head. And they're trying to pay for the sins of the Biden past. Because I've said it on these videos and articles I've written at gunfighterguy.shop for many years now. The biggest problem you have is that we were in recession. We've been in depression. It's been propped up by phony Fed money all along, and the BlackRocks of the world who have just kept it from getting out to the public because it's all propped up nonsense. It's monetary theory. And you got to have actual assets aligned with the value of the dollar. And this desire to crush the dollar and get rid of America as being the dominator of currency and make it a global centralized bank credit system, a digital currency. That's where they've all wanted this all to go. And they positioned us to go in that direction. Never thought that Trump was ever going to get back in office. Never thought that we would close the borders and pull all the assets for globalism back into nationalism and have a capitalist economy competing against socialist and communist economies. That was never in the cards. And people like Jerome Powell, who are very well aware of these policies, and that this is what the World Economic Forum wanted from day one, from centralized managed governments, because the centralized banks, the central banks that are financing the world, they were wanting to have this system in place and been plotting behind our backs all this time. We elect presidents and we elect congressional people and Senate representatives, but we don't elect people to run the Federal Reserve because it's supposed to be independent of politics, but yet they run our monetary policy. And they essentially decide how much wealth a country's going to generate. And you can't have foreign influencers, centralized banks, dominating that conversation. So Trump has every right in the world to shove Powell out of his office and put scrutiny to him, tamper with him all you can, because that's the only way that we have voter oversight of the Federal Reserve. And I would argue that you shouldn't even have it to begin with. If you're going to have it, then you need to have a president that's willing to attack when they manage the money incorrectly. And they're trying to wash, just like they did with BlackRock, They're trying to wash the debt of the covered recession that we've been in during the Biden years, depression, more than 2 consecutive quarters. It was 4 years, for more than 4 years. This whole thing started with the lockdowns and the shutting down of the economy, and they never really recovered. They just printed a bunch of phony money through it in the system, washed it through BlackRock and everybody else. And since most of the media companies were run by BlackRock managed funds, no one wanted to call them out on it, because Larry Fink would send them a little letter telling them, you see nothing, you say nothing, you do nothing, do what we tell you. And don't report on the recession and the bad negative numbers and jobs growth from the Biden administration, because we're working towards globalism. Never planned on Trump getting back in there, so they've all been caught flat-footed. They got a lot of problems, which is good, and Trump's calling Powell out on it, and he should, and he can't survive. But the larger argument is that we really should be rethinking the whole Federal Reserve System, because it doesn't work for the United States. It's an open wound into globalism and money manipulators that are dominating our currency and trying to hold back the wealth we can generate for ourselves, because they are deeply committed to wealth redistribution all around the world, and that's their overall commitment to their own enterprise. And they don't want voters to regulate how they conduct their banking business. So they created this Federal Reserve that serves them, it doesn't serve us, and you can't have that. So we're up for a bigger fight. But in the meantime, Jerome Powell, if he's not going to lower interest rates and do what the person that put him into that position wants him to do, needs to get out. And every day he stays in, Trump has a right to push and shove him any way he desires, because he's in the hot seat. And when you're in a hot seat, you're accountable. And I know Jerome Powell doesn't like that. You can't go to enough Jackson Hole meetings to get away from it, but the pressure needs to be intense, and people need to understand that they're fighting for control over their monetary system, not letting some centralized bankers, ruthless at that, destroy the world they live in, because they don't have elected representation in the Federal Reserve, and they should have all along. There's a better way to manage that money in the 1913 Jekyll Island escapade that gave us a Federal Reserve was a mistake from day one. And Andrew Jackson warned of it. You got to have some way to manage your money, but that ain't it. And it needs to be rethought and created under a new proposal that is American-based and not globalist-based. And the Federal Reserve is not a friend of America, and any laws that Jerome Powell cites that protects him from scrutiny is not appropriate, needs to be reconsidered, and certainly any legal measure we have to push back against that corrupt system needs to be applied, and I think President Trump's doing a good job of doing just that, and I highly support it. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.